I was 17 when we found a cave on my grandmother's property in eastern Kentucky. I've never told this story to anyone. Not my wife, not a therapist, nobody. Sealing the cave after Grandma Edith passed should have helped, but it did not. What Chester and I saw down there has never let go of me. I was what you'd call the nerdy kid back then, thick glasses, skinny as a rail. Every summer, my parents shipped me off to Grandma Edith's farmhouse in the foothills of the Appalachians, figuring the mountain air would be good for me. The house was everything a city kid like me thought was cool about the country. High ceilings, creaky wooden floors, wraparound porches, and dense forest in every direction. The nearest neighbor was Chester's family, and their place was nearly a mile down the dirt road. Past that, nothing but trees and hollers until you reached the county highway. Chester was a year younger than me, and he was everything I wasn't. He could fix engines, hunt, fish, and navigate the woods like he'd been born to it. Where I was pale and awkward, Chester was sun-darkened and confident. Where I worried about everything, Chester just did things. We'd become friends the summer before, mostly because we were the only kids for miles, and boredom breaks down barriers. He taught me how to shoot his BB gun and which berries were safe to eat. I helped him with this summer reading and showed him how to use his family's ancient computer. "John, you worry too much," he'd say when I hesitated at creek crossings or complained about spiderwebs. "It's just the woods. Ain't nothing out here gonna hurt you." I wanted to believe him. Chester made the forest feel like his backyard, and his confidence was infectious. Around him, I felt braver than I actually was. That summer, we were both restless in the way teenagers get when the days are long and the possibilities seem endless. We'd already built a rope swing over the creek, explored every deer trail, even tried to build a tree house that collapsed before we got the roof on. We needed something new, something bigger. We just had no idea what we were about to find. We found it in the third week of July, during a brutal heat wave that made the air shimmer and even drove the birds into shade. Chester and I were wandering the property, desperate for something to break the monotony. "Man, there's gotta be something we ain't explored yet," Chester said, wiping sweat from his forehead. We were on the ridge at the back of Grandma's land, where the trees were thick and the underbrush hadn't been touched in decades. "Maybe the creek again?" I suggested, though we'd been there twice already that week. "Nah, that's boring. We need something new." Chester stopped and pointed. "What's that?" I squinted. Through the foliage, I saw a darker shadow, something that didn't quite fit the natural pattern of trunks and branches. I squinted where he was pointing. Through the dense foliage, I could make out what looked like a darker shadow among the trees. We shoved through brush scratched by thorns and wrapped in spiderwebs. Chester led the way, while I followed and complained about the bugs. "Quit whining," he called. "You want to find something cool or not?" In the hillside, we found a depression about 15 feet across, and at its center, the mouth of a cave, half covered by a rusted iron gate. Time and weather had rusted most of it away, leaving gaps just big enough for nosy teenagers to squeeze through. "Holy crap," Chester breathed. The first time I'd heard him sound impressed. "John, look at this." I crept closer. The opening vanished into blackness. A cool breeze drifting out with the smell of damp earth and something I couldn't place. "Think it's an old mine?" I asked. Chester shook his head. "Nah, wrong kind of rock. Limestone country. It's a cave. A real cave." He was already kneeling at the gap, peering into the dark. "We should tell my grandmother," I said. "She'd just tell us to stay away." He grinned, the kind of grin that meant trouble. "Come on, just a quick look." "We don't have lights." "My phone does." I wanted to argue, but Chester was already squeezing through the gap. His movement echoed strangely inside. "Chester, wait up," I called. Being alone outside seemed worse than following. "Just for a minute." His voice came back, muffled and strange. "Just to see what's here." I slipped through after him, scraping my shoulder on the rusted metal. The passage opened immediately into a chamber 10 feet high and twice as wide. Chester's phone light swept over smooth limestone carved by water through the ages. "This is so cool," Chester whispered, and his voice echoed back at us from deeper in the cave. The floor was mostly level, covered with a layer of dirt and small rocks that crunched under our feet. Chester played a slide ahead, revealing that the cave continued back into the hillside, much further than either of us had expected. "Okay, we looked," I said. "Now let's go back and get real flashlights if we want to explore." But Chester was already moving deeper, his phone light bobbing as he walked. "Chester? Just a little further," he called back. "I want to see how far it goes." I followed. The alternative was standing alone in the cave mouth, and that wasn't happening. We made it 50 feet before Chester's phone died. The darkness swallowed us whole, the kind you never get in a city. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. "Chester?" My voice sounded small. "Right here. Don't panic." His hand grabbed my arm. "Stay close. We'll follow the wall back." We shuffled for 5 minutes along the wall, trying not to trip. When daylight finally appeared, we were both shaking, though neither admitted it. "That was awesome," Chester said, though I heard the relief in his voice. "It goes back really far," I said. "Yeah, we need real lights and rope. Explore it properly." I nodded, though something about the cave felt wrong. Maybe it was the darkness, or the way our voices echoed. "Tomorrow," Chester said, "we'll come back with supplies." As we walked through the woods toward the house, I kept looking over my shoulder at the mouth of the cave behind us. Even with the afternoon sun filtering through the trees, that dark opening seemed to pull at my attention. I should have listened to that feeling, should have told Grandma Edith, or just found something else to occupy our time that summer. But I was 17, and Chester made everything seem like an adventure, even the things that should have scared us away. We came back the next morning, loaded like explorers. Chester had his dad's heavy flashlight, a coil of rope, and glow sticks from his birthday. I brought a headlamp, extra batteries, chalk for marking our path, and a notebook to map it. "You sure like to be prepared," Chester said at the cave entrance. "Better than getting lost." He was already squeezing through the gap. "We won't get lost. We got lights this time." With real light, the cave felt different. What seemed mysterious in the dim glow of Chester's phone now looked like a normal limestone cavern. Water had carved smooth channels into the walls, and the floors sloped gently down as we moved deeper. "This is way bigger than I thought," Chester said, sweeping his light around. Several passages branched off, each fading into darkness. We spent an hour exploring the obvious routes, marking chalk arrows and dropping glow sticks. Chester sketched a rough map while I called out measurements. "Left passage goes about 60 feet and dead ends," I said. "Right passage curves back and connects with the center like a loop." The right passage drew us in. It ran straight back, sloping steadily down, and our lights couldn't find the end. "That's where we need to go," Chester said, his voice excited. 2 hours in, he made the observation that should have sent us back. "You notice anything weird about this place?" he asked, studying the walls. "What do you mean?" "No bats, no bugs, nothing." His light swept the ceiling and walls. "Every cave should have bats at least, spiders, crickets, something. But look, nothing." I stopped and looked. He was right. The place was sterile. No cobwebs, no droppings, no life. Even the puddles were clear and still. None of the algae you'd expect. "Maybe it's too far from the entrance?" I said. Chester shook his head. "Nah, caves are ecosystems. There should be something living here." We kept going. We were too caught up in the adventure to let a little oddity stop us. The cave was giving up its secrets, and we felt invincible. The center passage dropped 100 feet over 300 yards. Our chalk marks and glow sticks glowed faintly behind us. Then Chester spotted the elevated passage. "John?" "Look up there." I followed his flashlight beam to where the wall rose to our right. About 15 feet up was another opening. Unlike the others, it was perfectly round, 4 feet across, with a steady current of air flowing out. "Feel that breeze," Chester said, moving closer to the wall. I felt it. Cool, mossy, damp, but with something else underneath. Something I couldn't place. "We can't reach it," I said. "Not today, but with a ladder or rope?" He was already planning our next trip. I stared at the dark hole uneasy. The air was too cold, carrying sands that didn't belong in limestone. "I think we should head back," I said. "We've been down here for a while." Chester checked his phone. "Yeah, past lunch. Your grandma's probably wondering." We followed our chalk arrows and glow sticks back to the surface, faster this time. Sunlight hit like a flood, and I had to squint against it. "Tomorrow, we bring a ladder," Chester said. "Maybe we should tell someone where we're going," I suggested, "in case something happens." He gave me that look again, the one that said I worry too much. "Nothing's gonna happen. It's just a cave." But as we walked back through the woods, I kept thinking about that opening and the air flowing from it. The scent felt familiar, like something half-remembered from a dream. That night, I dreamed of deep places and moving air, and woke with the taste of moss in my mouth. Chester showed up the next morning with his dad's aluminum stepladder strapped to the four-wheeler, grinning like he had solved something. "Borrowed it while Dad was at work," he said, wrestling it off. "He won't miss it for a few hours." The ladder was heavier than it looked, and hauling it through the woods was an expedition in itself. We stopped every 50 yards to rest and untangle it from branches. By the time we reached the cave, we were both sweating. "This better be worth it," I muttered, helping him force it through the grate. "Trust me, it will." Getting the ladder down the sloping passage was another challenge. It was awkward in the tight space, and my headlamp cast confusing shadows. But Chester was determined, and we finally got it against the wall. "Hold it steady," he said, climbing. I braced it while his light swept the opening above. At the top, he went quiet. "What do you see?" I called. "It goes back a long way," he said, muffled. He climbed back down and we switched places. The ladder felt shaky under me, but I reached the opening. His flashlight had shown the tunnel stretching back, but what struck me was the sound. Water. Dripping, echoing as if from a much larger space. "You hear that?" I called. "Yeah, sounds like water. A lot of it." I climbed down and we stared at each other in the glow of our lights. "Underground river?" I said. "Or a lake? Only one way to find out." The elevated passage was more open than I expected. We could walk upright, the walls smooth limestone worn by water. The smell grew stronger as we moved, and the air felt thicker, carrying scents that reminded me of things long dead. After 200 feet, the passage opened. I have spent years trying to find words for what we saw, and I still can't do it justice. The cavern was vast, the size of a cathedral, with walls fading into darkness. In the center was a lake. The water was black and still, like a mirror reflecting nothing. Our lights reached only a few inches, and when Chester tossed in a pebble, the ripples died too quickly, as if the water swallowed them. "Jesus," Chester breathed, his voice echoing from the ceiling above. I swept my headlamp around the edges. The far shore was almost beyond reach, maybe 50 feet away. "How deep do you think it is?" Chester asked. "I don't know. Deep?" He was already digging in his pack. "Let's find out." He cracked a glow stick, tied it to a rock with a rubber band, and tossed it in. The green light sank, and sank, and sank. It never reached bottom. The glow vanished into distance until the surface was black again, showing no trace of what we had dropped. "That's not possible," Chester said, confidence gone. I stepped back from the edge. The lake felt alien. The air too still, the silence too complete. Even our voices seemed muffled, as if the water absorbed them. "We should go back," I said. But Chester was staring at the far shore, his light barely catching shapes in the dark. "There's something over there," he said. "On the other side." I looked. In the faint circle of light, I saw what might have been structures on the rock. Regular shapes that didn't look natural. "Chester, let's go back and think about this." "We need a boat," he said, ignoring me. "An inflatable raft. We could paddle over." The thought of being on that water clenched my stomach. "That's crazy. We don't even know how deep it is. What if we fall in?" "We won't. I'm a good swimmer." "In a lake that might not have a bottom?" He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw he felt it too. The sense that we had found something that shouldn't exist. But Chester never backed down from anything. "Tomorrow," he said, "we'll think tonight and come back with a plan." As we left through the passage and down the ladder, I kept looking back. The darkness seemed deeper than it should, and I felt something in that water watching. That night, I could not shake the image of the glow stick sinking into endless depths. In my dreams, I sank with it into darkness so complete I couldn't tell if my eyes were open or closed. Chester showed up the next afternoon with a small inflatable raft strapped to his four-wheeler, the kind meant for lazy rivers. He also had life jackets, waterproof flashlights, and a hand pump. "Where'd you get this?" I asked, though I already knew. "Borrowed it from my cousin Jake. He won't miss it." I eyed the raft. It was 6 feet long, built for calm water, not underground lakes. "Chester, I don't think that's going to work." "It'll be fine. It's rated for 2 people. We're light." Despite my doubts, I helped him haul it to the cave. His enthusiasm was hard to resist, and I was curious about the far shore. But the image of the glow stick sinking into black water never left my mind. Launching took longer than we expected. The rocky shore wasn't ideal. We had to clear stones for a spot. The whole time, I was aware of the water beside us, still as obsidian and reflecting our lights. "You sure about this?" I asked. "It's just water. Worst scenario, we get wet." But it wasn't just water, and we both knew it. The lake felt wrong. No lapping at the shore, no movement at all. Even when disturbed, the ripples died too fast, as if the water was heavier than it looked. Chester climbed in first with a flashlight. The raft barely dented the surface, as if it floated on something solid. "Come on," he said, steadying it. I climbed in reluctantly, paddle in hand. The moment we pushed off, I felt the lake take hold of us. It wasn't like floating, more like being suspended over an abyss. "Paddle," Chester said, shining his light ahead. The rowing was strange. The water gave almost no resistance. Yet, the raft crawled forward, slower than it should have, like paddling through oil, though the water looked and felt normal when I touched it. "This is taking forever," Chester muttered after what felt like 20 minutes. I looked back, and my stomach dropped. The rocky ledge was much farther away than it should have been, barely visible in our glow. Ahead of us, the far shore seemed closer than when we'd started. "Chester, something's not right about this. Just keep paddling. We're almost there." But we weren't. The harder we paddled, the less progress we made. The far shore stayed distant, while the shore behind us kept receding. It was as if the lake stretched itself, bending distance in weight that defied sense. Then Chester's light touched the far side, and we both went quiet. "What the hell is that?" he whispered. "I don't know, but I don't like it." The structure was 30 feet across, ringed with strange stone pillars. The rock was darker than limestone, smooth and almost metallic. Carved channels ran toward the water, and in the center stood something like an altar, though it was built for no human shape I could imagine. "We need to get closer," Chester said, but without his usual confidence. "No, we need to go back, now." I turned the raft, but he grabbed my arm. "Wait, look at the water." I followed his gaze. The water glowed faintly as if light rose from something far below. The glow was subtle, but unmistakable. The surface shifted, a slow bulge rising as though some unseen current was pushing up from the depths. "There's something down there," Chester said. "Something big." Then, our gears failed. Chester's flashlight flickered and died. My headlamp dimmed despite fresh batteries, and even my watch froze at 3:47. "Chester, we're leaving, now," I said, cracking a glow stick. He didn't argue. We paddled hard toward what we thought was shore, but the darkness pressed in, and our failing lights showed almost nothing beyond the raft. Then we heard it. A sound from beneath us, deep and resonant, like rock and metal groaning under pressure. It rose from the depths and vibrated through the water and into our bones. Ripples spread across the surface and faded too quickly. The raft shuddered. "Paddle faster," Chester said, and for the first time, I heard fear in his voice. The sound came again, closer. The water around us began to glow, the light moving upward as if something vast was rising. We paddled in silence, our failing lights barely cutting the dark. The shore seemed impossibly far, and with every stroke I was sure we would not make it. But somehow, we did. The raft scraped the rocks just as my headlamp died. We dragged it out and collapsed on the cavern floor, shaking in the shine of our last glow stick. "We can't tell anyone," Chester said finally. "They'd think we were crazy." I nodded, though part of me wondered if we were. The whole thing felt like a nightmare. As we packed up, I made the mistake of looking back. The water was still again, but I was certain something in the blackness was looking at us. For 3 days, I avoided the cave. I stayed close to the house, helped Grandma with chores, even started reading one of her old romance novels just to keep busy. But Chester wouldn't let it go. He showed up with a restless energy I'd never seen. "You can't just pretend it didn't happen," he said one Thursday morning on the porch. "We found something incredible." "We found something dangerous," I said. Our lights failed Chester, all of them, at the same time. "So we bring backups, more batteries, better lights." I looked at him and realized what I had mistaken for confidence was obsession. He couldn't sit still. Dark circles under his eyes showed he wasn't sleeping. "I need to go back," he said, leaning forward. "Don't you want to know what it is?" "No, I don't." Chester stood and paced to the edge of the porch. "Fine, then I'll go alone." "You can't." "Watch me." I felt trapped between two choices. Let Chester go alone, or return to something I wanted to forget. The thought of him down there by himself was worse than my fear. "If I go with you," I said, "we go at dawn, we bring extra everything, and at the first sign of trouble, we leave, no arguments." Chester grinned, hollow. "Deal." That afternoon, we gathered supplies. Chester had found a larger raft, more stable than the first. Borrowed it from my sister's boyfriend. We packed flashlights, batteries, glow sticks, rope, even a first aid kit. Looking back, it was an expedition, not an adventure. "One more thing," Chester said as we loaded the four-wheeler. "I want to actually reach the far shore this time and get a closer look." Every instinct screamed no, but I had committed, and despite my fear, I was curious. The shapes we had seen haunted my dreams. I needed to know. The forest felt different on the way back, quieter. Even the birds were silent. We slipped through the grate and down to the lake, our equipment heavier with every step. The cavern was as we left it, vast and still. The water stretched into darkness, smooth as glass. Against every survival instinct, I helped them launch the boat. The crossing dragged, and with each stroke, I was certain we were making a mistake. But something was different about the far shore. Are those lights? I asked, squinting. Chester raised the binoculars and went still. There's something over there. What? On the far shore. I see movement. And you're right, there are lights. Not flashlights. Something else. Something that glows. I snatched the binoculars. In the far distance, a faint blue-green glow flickered, like the bioluminescence in the water. Chester, we're turning around right now, I said, handing them back. My voice was a hoarse whisper. He looked through them again and gasped. Chester had gone completely silent. His mouth moved, but no words came at first. Then, in a whisper that grew louder, he began repeating, It comes out of the water. It goes into the water. It comes out of the water. It goes into the water. I shook him, but he wouldn't stop. His eyes were fixed on the far shore, wide and shining, as though he was watching something emerge that I couldn't yet see. That's when the water around us began to glow. The bioluminescence rose from the depths like we'd seen before, but this time it was brighter, more intense, and in that growing light, I could see the true scale of what lay beneath the water. It wasn't a lake at all. It wasn't a lake. It went down forever. An eye, a well, a portal, an abyss eternal and bottomless, vast and deep, alien light, forever and ever. I screamed. I know I screamed because my throat was raw afterward, but I couldn't hear the sound over the roar of blood in my ears. Chester was screaming too, or maybe laughing. I couldn't tell which. The eye blinked. The entire cavern shuddered as something the size of a mountain moved beneath us. Water that wasn't water displaced around us, and our tiny raft was suddenly riding waves that shouldn't exist in an underground space. This shook Chester out of his fugue. We both dug our paddles into the glowing surface, fighting against currents that felt more like muscle contractions than water flow. As we stumbled out of the boat onto the shore, I made the mistake of looking back. The eye was there, staring up at us through bottomless layers of water that should have blocked any light. And in that ancient gaze, I saw recognition. It saw us. It saw into us, and through us. Something in Chester's mind shattered. I could see it in his eyes. I grabbed him and dragged him down the tunnel. We abandoned the raft and ran for the passage, leaving our carefully gathered equipment scattered on the cavern floor, up through the elevated passage, down the ladder we didn't even bother to retrieve, through the cave system toward the blessed light of day. We burst from the cave into afternoon sunlight that felt impossibly bright and clean. Chester collapsed immediately, retching onto the forest floor. I managed to stay upright long enough to drag him away from the cave entrance before my own legs gave out. Chester was never the same after that day. His laugh, the easy confidence that used to pull me along into trouble, all of it vanished. He hardly spoke, and when he did, it was whispers about water and ice that never stopped watching. Before the summer was over, his parents sent him away to a hospital in the big city. Someplace special, they said. Though they never used the word, I knew they meant. I never saw him again. At first, I thought he'd come back the next summer, that we'd pick up where we left off like nothing had happened. But his absence became permanent, a hollow space I couldn't fill. I carried the weight of it alone, pretending normal life was still possible, while the memory pressed against me like the dark water under the hills. That was 10 years ago. I've been in therapy on and off ever since, cycling through doctors who nod sympathetically when I tell them about recurring nightmares of black water and watching ice. They prescribe medications for anxiety and sleep disorders, but nothing stops the dreams completely. Chester wasn't as lucky. The last I heard, he was living on the streets, talking to things that weren't there and insisting that something was still watching him. When Grandma Edith passed away a year ago and left me the house, the first thing I did was hire a contractor to seal the cave entrance with concrete and rebar. I told him it was a safety hazard. I paid him extra to use twice as much concrete as necessary and to never mention the job to anyone. Some doors, once opened, need to be closed forever. Late at night, I swear that, sometimes, I can still hear the sound of water moving far beneath the ground.